Hi there guys, and welcome back to another IBRACORP video. Thanks for coming and checking out the channel today. It is an absolute pleasure to have you with us. And now if you watched our video from last week, where basically it was our first video on camera, we showed you how we installed our HBA card to hopefully prepare for what was going to be our ZFS array. And the good news is we did get it going, and we have ZFS running on our Proxmox server, which is sitting in my server rack here. For those who aren't familiar, Proxmox is a virtualization platform, and it allows us to host virtual machines and Linux containers, not to be confused with Docker containers. So it can be quite flexible. By definition, I believe that it's aimed towards enterprise environments. However, anyone can use it. It's free and open source, so it doesn't cost you a dime if you want to give it a go. And we will be covering Proxmox a lot more moving forward. So I'm hoping you guys will maybe spin up a virtual machine, which we did cover a video on getting Proxmox running in a virtual machine on Unraid. And that way you can install it and at least help navigate it, help understand how it works to see whether it's something you want to try. But ultimately the best way to run it is obviously bare metal on something like maybe you have a small form factor computer, a laptop, anything that you think you'll be able to put VMs onto afterward. Now today's video is just a brief introduction. We're just going to go through what our current setup looks like. As the series goes on, I will be doing short, sharp videos specifically on the different types of things that we did to build it to this stage. Hang in there, we'll introduce you to what's going on here, what it is you're looking at exactly, how this plays into our overall media collections, things like Plex, things like virtual storage. Do we want things like getting ZFS going, and also a bunch of other stuff as well. So I hope you guys enjoy. This is going to be a new direction for the channel as well. So we're helping expand our knowledge, expand what we've learned. We've been working on this stuff in the background quietly for the past few months actually. It's a culmination of knowledge and information that we've learned from our community members, so people like you watching this video, as well as stuff that we've been developing ourselves in-house. And if you're interested in supporting the channel, check the links down below in the description. You can like and subscribe. Thank you very much. So without further ado, let's just get stuck into today's video and we'll walk you through what's going on. Alright guys, so welcome back. I know, like I said, this is going to be a little bit different. It's a new direction that we want to take the channel. There's a lot of things that we've learned. I hope you guys will really enjoy. So big shout out to Hawks and Distuck in our community, our admins there. We really appreciate you. The things that these guys have done for the community is fantastic. And some of the knowledge they bring, especially when it comes to Proxmox, has been absolutely pivotal and allows us to pass that knowledge on to you guys. So anyway, let's cut to the chase. What have we got happening today? So what I'm going to show you today is a project that has taken me about 2 to 2.5 weeks to prepare and implement. And this involved basically migrating all my web services and Plex to a virtual machine running on Ubuntu, which is running on Proxmox. But there's a slight twist to what we've done and why we're showing you this today. So on screen, I'm just going to bring up a quick diagram of what our hardware looks like and what we expect to do with it. Okay, so as you can see, here's a bit of a crude drawing of it all laid out, and I did this in diagrams.net, or it used to be called Draw.io for those who have used that before. So here's basically the layout of this new server and how it was configured, and the work that we did last week is for this purpose. So as it stands currently, we have the motherboard. Attached to the motherboard, we have an SSD. Now the SSD goes directly to the motherboard. Last week's video, I did show it going into the HBA card. That was incorrect. It actually goes directly to the motherboard. The HBA card is obviously plugged into the motherboard as well. And on board the motherboard itself is the NVMe that we have. Now what we've done is we've started up the machine, we've installed Proxmox, and we've installed it on a standalone SSD. Okay, not an NVMe, just a standard SSD. It doesn't need to be big. In our case, I believe it was 120 gig SSD. So that's where we've installed it, okay? If I had the choice and I had the time and the money, I probably would have gone and maybe got a 250 gig SSD just to have that extra bit of space, but it doesn't need that much, okay? Because primarily all we're going to be running is Proxmox itself and one VM, which I'll get to shortly. So the NVMe is plugged into the motherboard. Okay, all of these three items are directly into the motherboard. In the HBA card, we've got our 4 disks. So our 4 data disks. It is not recommended you plug SSDs into a HBA card. You can if you so choose. From what I could find, they don't recommend it. The SSD, like I said, goes on the motherboard, and it's also important because we want to be able to boot to it. We don't want to have to try and pass through the card in the BIOS. The card will be handled later. We have 4 disks, they have data on them. What do we do with them? They're attached to the HBA card. What we do in Proxmox is create a virtual machine running TrueNAS. Now, this is not TrueNAS Core, we're talking about TrueNAS Scale, okay? Because we're trying to basically develop a bleeding edge solution here. It's definitely nothing new per se. We're not doing anything that hasn't been done before, but I certainly think it deserves more attention than what it has for what you can achieve out of this, okay? So bear with us for a moment. So we have TrueNAS running as a virtual machine on Proxmox. In Proxmox, once we set up the virtual machine, which we will be doing in a separate video, but in TrueNAS, we have set up a ZFS array with our 4 disks, keeping in mind that we want the same size disks and preferably the same type of disks, hence why I was limited to 4 because I didn't want to have to go purchase some more. So this is me trialing it, and if I like where this is going down the track, I will make sure that I try to put the investment in and get the amount of disks that I think I would need straight off the bat and have it done that way. In saying that though, there is an update that is supposed to come towards the end of this year, which will allow you to actually add disks to an existing VDEV in TrueNAS. Don't know when that's going to happen, I wouldn't hold my breath, but we will see where that goes. So for the moment, we have 4 disks, a ZFS array in one VDEV on TrueNAS. What do we do then? Well, what we do then is actually pass that VDEV back to Proxmox. So in Proxmox, we can set a data source, and we set shares and the data source in Proxmox so that we can use the storage that we've created. So with the 4 disks, they're attached to the HBA card. Now, when we start up the virtual machine for TrueNAS, what we want to do is pass through the HBA card as a PCI device. We also pass through the NVMe. So as you can see from this picture, it doesn't show us using the NVMe. So what we've done is created the NVMe, we're sending that through along with our HBA card. So both of those are simply passed through to TrueNAS or TrueNAS to handle those devices. Proxmox has nothing to do with them. However, when we get to the storage, so when we've created our ZFS array, we've then passed it through, we've created a share, a Samba share, we can then send that back to Proxmox and mount it in Proxmox as a storage directory. So what we've essentially created is a storage location where we can then continue to use storage within Proxmox. That is what this represents here. So then you can see our virtual machines, which we create in Proxmox, they actually live on this storage, which is protected now by our ZFS array, however you guys want to say it. That now lives on here. So it benefits from all of our data protection, but also benefits from the speed and reliability of that array. Now that's a nice picture. I know it's probably a little confusing still, so I'm going to actually show you Proxmox and you'll have a look for yourself. So here we are in Proxmox, and I can show you, so here's our virtual machine running TrueNAS. Now the specs I've assigned to this virtual machine is about 6 CPUs and 24 gigs of RAM. You can see our RAM sits at about 60% at the moment, and that fluctuates obviously as things are used and not used. I will show you TrueNAS as well before the end of the video so that you can understand how it works in this cycle. So the first thing we did was create our IBRANAS. So this is TrueNAS running inside a virtual machine. Then gone and done what we needed to do inside of TrueNAS. We've come back to Proxmox, and then we've actually mounted those shares in here. So if you have a look at these shares, we have an ISO share I've created. I've got a virtual machine share. So our vDisk for this virtual machine, Ubuntu VM, lives on that array. We then have our media data set. We have a vDisks data set. So I'm taking some other disks in there for other virtual machines that I don't want on the main array. And we also have one for our backups. So we're taking regular backups from within Proxmox, which we can schedule, which I have scheduled. And if you come into backups here, you can see that they are automatically backing up our virtual machines for us. Guess where that's being stored? Back on our ZFS array. So it's protected by the ZFS array. So basically Proxmox is running very lightweight because it doesn't have to run on anything, it doesn't have to do anything, it doesn't have to store anything. That's being handled on the data disks that are inside the server and being run by TrueNAS. So we will actually go into Proxmox a lot more. If you guys are interested, let us know in the comments what your thoughts are of this direction, because if you guys are interested, we will happily make a lot of videos. And I really feel like you guys give it a go, you will see a lot of potential here that you may be able to implement in your own setups at home. Especially for us self-host nerds, we're sitting at home, bored, something to do. This is the perfect opportunity for you to try something new. Okay, so here we are on the TrueNAS Scale login. We'll sign in here, and you're going to see a bunch of stats here on the dashboard. I'll walk you through a couple of the things that we have set up, and then we can come back to this main dashboard. So if we're going to storage, the first thing you're going to end up doing is creating some storage. Now keep in mind guys, again, I will do a specific video on setting this up. Today is just an introduction on how it looks currently and what it's doing. So ignore this second pool here, if you will. I've minimized that. The first pool that you see is our array of 4 disks that we've got. Okay, so basically we went in, we created a pool, and we've set them up the way we want. And then the next thing we did was create a couple of data sets. Now if you don't know, data sets allows you to separate the data out into essentially if you want to think of it as partitions, but it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a partition. So if we open up a data set here, for example, edit options, you've got all these settings that you can set on each individual data set. So we've got ZFS deduplication, settings you want for that, case sensitivity, compression level, the synchronization as well. So we'll show you a lot of tips and tricks on setting this up when I do that video. So again, we've got our main pool, so that's created. The next thing I did was create those data sets. So I've got VMs, media, history, and that will allow me to separate out what I want to do with them. The next thing we did was edit the permissions. So we had to allow ourselves to have permissions. If I go to view permissions, you'll see that we are the owners now, myself. To do that, we had to go to credentials and we go to users. Okay, so we created a user. There's our UID. You've also got all these other settings here. So local groups, there's our GID there, 1000 as well. Directory services, anything you want to set up, Active Directory, LDAP, etc. We can configure that here if we wanted to. So if you already have an LDAP server, this could possibly be something you want to use. 2-factor authentication is built in as well. Now, after we've created the credentials, we then come back to storage and we change those permissions. Okay, so by default, it's root permissions that has them, and we want to change that to the user that we just created. Once that's done, we go to shares. Okay, now in our Samba shares, our SMB shares here, we've gone and created add, and we've created all these different shares, as you can see. So what do we do then, you might ask? So now we're back in Proxmox. We essentially go to our data center, we go to storage, and we go to add, and we add the type of storage that we want to put in here. So we will then go with, for example, SMB and CIFS. The ID can be anything, as you can see here. We've just called it what it is. So in my case, media, vDisk, etc. We put in our credentials that we created in TrueNAS and the server address, and then we can pick the share that shows up. So it will sign in and then show us the shares that are available using that account. And then in content, you can select what you want this storage to be used for in Proxmox. So we can say we store disk images in here, we store ISO images, templates, or only just one thing. Now I chose to go with the route of creating very purpose-built data storages and shares. So as you can see, I have one storage specifically for backups, and it goes to a specific share called backups on a specific data set. Okay, so we're controlling that data from the top right down to the bottom and vice versa. We then have a spot just where we keep our ISOs, for example. So our ISO images will live here, Ubuntu is there. And now I added media. And you might be wondering, why is media in here? That should be controlled by TrueNAS, and you are correct. I've only got it in here just so that I can have a quick glimpse of the storage in that location and how it's going. Now that's basically me explaining the foundation of what we were doing last week. Okay, I only showed you the hardware side last week of us setting it up. Now I've showed you the overall software side of things, how we've set it all up and configured it. Again, this is not a detailed configuration video because those settings require some real focus and we want to do them individually with you guys. So today's an overall view on how it all works together, and then we'll do individual videos for you, depending on your feedback, of course. So it's really important you guys give us your feedback. Let us know if you're interested so that we can continue doing the series. You can let us know on Discord and in the comments on the video below. So the next thing I have done, okay, we've got our IBRANAS that's running all of our storage, and its only purpose is to manage our storage. The next thing we've created is a virtual machine, which is going to be running our Plex, sonar, radar, all of our automation, for example, and seeing how that ties in with our current setup. Now I've already done all that, and it's running on this server here called Romulus, or this virtual machine I should say, and that is running Ubuntu server. As you can see, very minimal impact on the system. Network traffic is high because it's using a lot of stuff when it's downloading or uploading, whatever the case might be. And we can see our CPU here being used as well, possibly transcoding something as we speak. Now this is a lot more lightweight approach than what we had previously. I will add that this also is running Docker on there, so this is all using Docker and Docker Compose. So Docker Compose is running all of our applications in there and allows us to spin it up very quickly. Okay, so we've set up a repository where we pull our Docker Compose files from, and we set that up. Now there's more on that we would love to share, but we're just not there yet. But we are working on a very cool system that will allow you to copy the Compose files that we show in our videos directly into a server from a repository that you'll be able to contribute to and read from, so that it's open source, something that we want to do to give back to our community. So stay tuned for that. That will come in the future, but there's just a little cookie crumb for you to go with. So this server is essentially our media server, if you want to think about it that way. Currently it's also doing our reverse proxying with traffic, but going forward, eventually I will set up a standalone machine or a Linux container to handle that side of things, so that I can try and separate things out a little bit. But as it stands, that's our one-stop shop, and that's because I migrated it from my test server before I put it in here, so I kind of just wanted it all in one machine. Now something you may not have noticed is we have a dark mode in Proxmox. If you go ahead and install Proxmox by default, it is blaringly white. It will blind you pretty much, and you guys will be complaining about this video in no time. However, today I have got the dark mode for you, and it's very simple to run. So if you pretty much go to your console here, go to the shell, it takes us into our shell, or you can do it through SSH, however you prefer to get into your Proxmox server. There's a command you can run, and it will install what this is known as a Discord dark theme. Looks very close to Discord, as you can see by the color scheme. Makes it much nicer to use. I'll drop that command in the description for you guys so that you can run it yourself if you're already running Proxmox, to give you a bit of a head start. So some of the questions you might have is, what are the benefits of having TrueNAS handling this storage media? Now, I can't possibly cross them all off in one video, but some of the things that are worth noting is we have obviously our ZFS array, and it's handled very well by TrueNAS Scale. It's very purpose built and it's easy to manage. The other thing is we have it on a lower level than the Proxmox server itself. So we have it as a virtual machine, and if we're backing up that virtual machine and its settings, we can relaunch at any point in time. So if something happens to our Proxmox host, our SSD dies, whatever the case might be, all of our data is still living on the NVMe and on the array. So we would simply start up another VM with the same settings and just carry on exactly where we were before. The other thing is our Samba sharing and our network access makes it extremely easy. So I have on startup a mount which will mount those shares, slide of Romulus here, and that will show up for sonar, radar, Plex, etc., and allow them to access that data directory straight away. The speed is phenomenal. We will show you proof of how fast the read writes are and how less intensive it is on your system running it with this methodology. So there's a couple of things in Proxmox we can do that also set it apart, which make it really nice to manage from a system administrator point of view. Firstly, we can directly set up scheduled backups that will happen without us even needing to know about it. It will happen while the virtual machine is still running, okay? So using snapshot technology, which has been around for a while, especially familiar with hypervisors, taking a snapshot of your server is very important because you can essentially just go back to a backup in no time with the actual virtual machine still live and running. Incredible stuff. With so much more to share, so much more that Proxmox can do, so much more that TrueNAS Scale can offer us and for us to cover, We look forward to getting some more content out to you guys. So guys, this is pretty much it for today's video. I just wanted to give you a little bit more of a sneak peek on some of the stuff we've been working on in the background. Be sure to let us know your ideas and thoughts about this setup, and whether you want to see more about it, let us know in Discord, let us know in the comments below. If you're interested in ZFS, you're interested in TrueNAS Scale, you're interested in Proxmox, and you're interested in your home automation being run on this platform, there's so much we can show you. Stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next IBRACORP video.